GLC, we had our final chapel for spring 2024. The title was The Win and the Wrestle. We all have areas in our life that we wrestle with, those areas of weakness. And so often what we try to do is create an environment where we are now independent of that weakness. But we find in Scripture that God will never create an environment where you do not need to be dependent upon Him. We're going to discover that the win and the wrestle is not greater independence, but greater dependence. But you need to understand this. Freedom, and this is you need to write this down. This is a big thought. Freedom is not independence. Freedom is choosing what you are dependent on. Freedom is not independence. Freedom is choosing what you are dependent on. And that's so countercultural. Oh my gosh, that's so countercultural. Callista, that's completely opposite of the trajectory of our lives. I mean, think about it. We think that the more independent I become, the more free that I am. We live our whole lives on that whole entire, that is how we are wired by culture to perform. In fact, as a dad now, oh my gosh, I'm recognizing this more and more than ever before. I have a 10-and-a-half-month-old son. He is a joy bomb. I absolutely love him. And you know what he's doing? He's becoming more and more independent. He's becoming more and more independent. The dude is now off the bottle now, and he's on the sippy cup. Okay? The man is now like straight up, like he's doing the goo goo gaga stuff. He just started to say da 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 da. He has no clue what he's saying, but I'm going to receive it, right? I'm going to be like, yep, that's me. 100%. He's doing, I'm sorry, ma. Over here, it hasn't happened yet, but we're believing for it. I'm just going to hold that he said da 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 first. Come on, somebody. He's becoming more and more independent. He's now taking that sippy cup. And I mean, we're talking, you seen that TikTok, that, give me that. That's him. And he's like, I'm not joking. Like, that's what he's doing. That's how he's going. Like, he's becoming more and more independent. And I'm telling you this, for me as a dad, if I'm doing my job, if I am being a good dad, if I am being a good father, then you know what my win is? My win is that he would become more and more independent of me. I am parenting him towards him leaving, towards him launching, towards him becoming completely free, completely independent. That's my win as a father. And that's the exact opposite of the win of our Heavenly Father. It's the exact opposite. Freedom is not independence. Freedom is you choosing what you are dependent on. You have to recognize this. It says here in verse 25 that the man, God, when he saw that he was going to lose the match, he breaks Jacob's hip. He pulls Jacob's hip out of joint. When God saw that he was going to lose the match, okay, hold on. You have to recognize, look at this. It says that Jacob was winning. No, he was wrestling God and Jacob was winning. Like he was beating God. He was beating God. And yet God literally in this moment, he purposefully makes Jacob weak. The hip is where you exude all the power from your body. The hip is where you exude all, like if you are going to lift anything, all the power actually comes from your hips. And God takes the place of strength and he makes it a place of weakness. Why does he do that? You need to write this down. God will never create an environment where you do not need him. God recognizes that Jacob is going to win, and he says, Jacob, that's not the win. He says, I see that I've given you free will, son, I've seen that I've given you the ability to do what you want. You have the ability to get as sharp as you absolutely can. You have the ability to become as good as you could possibly become. When it comes to your wiring, when it comes to your season, when it comes to victory over sin, you can become as independent as you want. But you know what? That's not the win. It's not the win. And in this moment, he literally makes Jacob weak. And you and I would go, but God, I'm supposed to be sharper. But God, I'm supposed to get stronger. And Trevor, God's like, yes, yes, for sure. But in a certain way. Remember, freedom, it's not independence. It's the choice of what you are dependent on. In our pursuit of being sharp, what we end up doing is we end up trying to create an environment of independence where we do not have weakness and we do not need God. And God sees this in Jacob, and in his mercy and in his grace, he goes, you know what? What you think is the win is not the win. And he makes an area of strength a weakness. And you would think that maybe Jacob in this moment would get a clue, right? You'd think that in this moment that he'd be done, because he breaks his hip and then God's like, I need you to stop wrestling now. But what does Jacob keep doing? He keeps wrestling. He keeps going. Verse 26, he keeps going. He keeps wrestling and he keeps going. I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. I'm not going to let you go until you eradicate the weakness that is of myself. I'm not going to let you go until you change what I am struggling with and you make it a strength, God. And God says, you know what I need you to do? I need you to go ahead and just tell me one thing, Jacob. What is your name? What is your name? The reason why this is so important and the reason why this matters so much is because God in this moment is making Jacob declare an aspect of his life that he hides as many times as he possibly can. Because the name Jacob, it does not mean anything strong. It means all kinds of things deceptive. It means all kinds of things of reaching, grabbing, striving, not good enough, so I got to stretch. Not good enough, so I got to be more than I could be. It's heel grabber, it's deceiver, it's deception. And all of his strength that he ended up accumulating actually all came from this point of struggle. And God's like, Jacob, what is your name? What is your name? Jacob keeps wrestling with God. He unjoints, he takes out a joint. I'll just ask you here. I want to spend a little bit more time on this self-awareness here. Here's why. Write this down. Because self-awareness of your weakness is your first step to freedom. Self-awareness of your weakness is your first step to freedom. What's got you out of joint? Play on words there. What's got you flustered? What's got your feathers all just ruffled? Let's look at 4 different areas of life, right? You can look at it this way. What's got you out of joint? Is it body stuff? Okay, this means like your fuel and your fitness and your sleep. You know, you got your 4 quadrants of life: body, mind, soul, spirit. Body, your fitness, and your fuel. Is that an area of wrestle for you? Sleep. You just can't seem like the timing, the scheduling, stuff with the body. Is that an area of wrestle for you? Or is that got you out of joint? Maybe it's mind stuff. Maybe it's the academics. Maybe it's what you're putting in your ear gate or your eye gate. It's your mind. Is that the place that you are out of joint? What is your wrestle? What is your weakness? Again, I'm belaboring this because self-awareness of where you are weak is the first step to you finding freedom. Is it soul related? What's soul? That's your relationships. It's your relationships with others and your relationship with God. Has that been the wrestle for you? Or is it your spirit? Is that the passion? Is that the thing that you've been putting your hands to this entire semester, this entire academic year? Is that the wrestle? The fact that you don't know yet what maybe you should put all of your spirit into, is that the wrestle? What's got you out of joint? Because God's trying to pinpoint that for you today. He's saying, you know what? You've been sharpened. You are my son. You are my daughter, who I love and whom I am well pleased. But what's the win in the wrestle? Where is it? Because that's where I want you to recognize today where the freedom and the win is from. Jacob, he's confronted with the reality of who he is. His name in life was geared towards creating independence. And yet self-awareness of your weakness is the first step to freedom. So this is what we end up doing. We have my weakness, and then we have God. We talked about this real quick, but I have to share mine. For me, how this message has come out of this wrestle for me. My weakness. And the one that I'm trying to completely just eradicate and do everything I can to level up from would be my motives. My motives. The why behind my what. The why behind what I do, I will wrestle with the questions of, why do you like to do this? What is the amount of selfishness that I see, the amount of self-serving that I have to wrestle with mentally? It makes me feel so weak. And like, God, should I even be doing this? If this is like the first thing that I think about is to fulfill myself, these motives, I can't seem to get past them. I'm still wrestling with them. And then God told me this. He said, Isaac, you never graduate from wrong motives. You're human. The motives will always be a wrestle. The question isn't whether or not they will be there. The question is whether or not they will lead you. And so here I am in the wrestle with my weakness, and yet Jacob, what he ends up doing is he's done wrestling with his weakness, and he turns to wrestling with God. TJ, come on up here. He's done wrestling with his weakness, and this is what we end up doing. TJ's God. This is what we end up doing. We're like, God, I'm done. I'm done trying to wrestle with this sin. I know it's supposed to be removed, but I'm struggling. I can't do it on my own. So then what do? I start grappling with God, and I'm like, God, why won't you fix this? And then you go and you keep wrestling, and you're like, God, why won't can't this season end, please? Would this season just end? And you go back to God, and you're like, God, what is going on? Why can't I graduate from this thing? And then you're like, oh, this is the biggest one, my wiring. God, why can't this change? We're wrestling with the weakness, and then we go to wrestling with God. And it's in this moment that God changes Jacob's name. And he says, after Jacob comes to a self-awareness of his weakness, God then says, you will no longer be called Jacob. Gesundheit. You will no longer be called Jacob. You will be called Israel. For you have fought with God and man and won. Now, this is what has changed my life. Because I have read this before. And I have read the definition of what Israel means. And I always see two definitions. The one we just read, for you have fought with God and man and won. And then I also see definitions that says God fights and God prevails. God fights and God wins. But then it also says you have fought with God and man and won. Which is it? It seems like they're polar opposites. My original understanding is, Jacob, you fight with God and you win. Or it's God wins. What is it? And this has changed my life. And I hope that it changes yours. Because the win in the wrestle is this reality right here. You are not wrestling your weakness and then wrestling with God. That's not the win. What you are doing is the recognition of, I'm not wrestling with God. I'm wrestling with God. I'm not wrestling with God on what's going on. I'm wrestling with God. It's Him and me. And God's the one that wins. But I'm wrestling with Him. I'm not wrestling with Him. I'm wrestling with him. And he's the one that prevails because he's the one that leads. It's not me, it's him. I'm wrestling with God on my weakness. I'm not wrestling with God. God, why? God, why can't this? I'm wrestling with God. Okay, God, this is how you've wired me. This is my season. I know I can have victory. I wrestle with you. You're with me. I choose to be with you because here's the win in the wrestle. Write this down. The win in the wrestle is not greater independence. The win in the wrestle is a greater dependence. The win in the wrestle is not a greater independence, but a greater dependence. God, I am not independent from you. I am independence on you. So Isaac, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm supposed to be, last little thing, TJ, I'm supposed to be independence. I'm supposed to be in dependence. I'm supposed to be more and more dependent on you. So what does that mean? Does that mean I'm just supposed to go, God, I'm independence. I just lean back. And no. No. It's a wrestling with. It's a wrestling with. It's a wrestling with. Not with God, but with God. Not with God, but with God. The win in the wrestle isn't that you stop wrestling. The win in the wrestle is that you start wrestling with God. So students, what do I want you to be aware of as you go into this summer? Yeah, let's be aware of our strengths. But you know what I'd rather you be aware of? Your weakness. Because it says that Jacob lived the rest of his life with that limp. It says that he lived the rest of his life marked by that weakness. But Jacob came to the reality of knowing, God, I'm with you. You lead, I'll limp. You lead, and I'll limp. My name is Israel. God prevails. God wins. I am weak. He is strong. That's why Paul said, I boast not in my strength, but in my weakness. Because when I am weak, God prevails. He is strong. So this is what I want us to do in this moment. I want us to spend a moment with God connecting not to a strength, but connecting to a weakness. Posture of weakness that I want us to collectively be in as a college is the posture of kneeling. So this song's going to play, and the pastors in the room might feel led to pray for you at just different times, but what I want you to do in this moment is I want you to take a page out of Jacob's story, and I want you to, instead of focusing on maybe where you've been strong, where are you weak? And don't grow for beggar independence, but a better dependence. I want us to kneel up here at the front. You can spread out, and I'll ultimately close our time with prayer. If you need your passage, if you need your Bible, if you need your notepad, maybe you need your letter, maybe you need something else. But let's end our semester not in dependence, but with a greater dependence on God.